Good afternoon, everybody. At least I'm assuming it's afternoon where you are. It's afternoon where I am. So we are going to be starting soon. We're going to be talking about how to teach your team to make good decisions. And, this is an important thing. It's critical to me. And I think it's critical to all managers. So um, looking forward to starting again. Going to start just about 30 seconds. We'll get going. I'm doing all the technology, so you're going to see me looking around all kinds of ways. But um, first, I just want to welcome everybody and say thank you for coming to this little session. Um, I want to start with a little story. So, I was once sitting in the office of a colleague, another manager up here, and at one point, someone from her team stuck their head in and said, "Hey, I need you to make a decision on X." And she, asked a question or two and then made the decision, and that person walked away. And once that person was out of earshot, she looked at me. She kind of, gave me that exasperated little sigh, and she said, "You know, I I don't know why they won't make these decisions on their own." And I thought of it for a second. I was like, I know this person. She's very open and honest. She's not a micromanager where she has to control everything. I know her team. They're talented. They're good. They have a good relationship with each other and with her. And it was a really interesting question because the typical reasons why didn't make sense. But as I started talking to her and I started going into it, what I realized was she never really taught them how to make decisions or taught them her way of making decisions so that they would feel comfortable doing it. She could say all day long, "Hey, I want you to make these decisions. I trust you." But unless they knew how she was going to do things, they felt uncomfortable. They wanted her either to make the decision or to kind of give the final little go ahead, which is really where the idea for this content came from, is teaching your team to make the decisions so that it saves the big decisions for you and you get more time. You're not caught up in those little popping their heads in and saying, "Hey, can you do this?" or waiting to do something because you're not available at the moment. um, and that's really where a manager can help the team. um, Now, I suggest, teaching it this way and kind of going about it the way I am because, decisions are rarely clear cut. Saying, "Think of this isn't usually not going to be very helpful because there's so many different factors, variables, and all those different things that come into play, right? So you want to make sure that, you're going through this process properly. So as I go through this content, please feel free to add comments. I can see them. They're on a little bit of a delay, so it may take me a minute or so to actually see the comment. But let me know your comments and questions. Or simply put, "Hey, this is so and so from whatever city you're from," and so I can see who's all here today. After this session, I will be, this is being recorded, and I will be able to make this available on my YouTube channel. So feel free to go look at that if you need a refresher or if you want to share with anyone. Say, "Hey, I watched this video and I got some good ideas." All right. So what do you say we get started with the content? All right. So the first thing I talk about is, as a manager, you have to have a process. Now, everybody's process is going to be a little different, and you're probably going to have different processes for different decisions. Big decision, the process might be a lot different than a little decision. I really kind of break my decisions down into three categories. One is what I call a North Star decision. And that's something that, you know, really, that North Star is that guiding principle. It's that thing that makes me want to do X. And those decisions tend to be fairly easy because I go to my North Star. And if that's the decision, then I can make it very quickly. Great example of that is, if I'm thinking, "Oh, do I want to reschedule a one-on-one that I have with an employee?" Now, to me, a one-on-one is, it's a North Star. It's something that I take very seriously and I do very intently. so I don't mess around with it. Oops. And so for me, the North Star becomes a very decision. Do I reschedule this one-on-one? No. This is too important for me. It's a North Star decision. This could be something, your North Star could be customer service. Hey, we take care of the customer above all things. So this decision's easy. Take care of the customer, right? Those North Star decisions tend to be fairly simple, rarely, complex or controversial, but they're ones that you can make very quickly. Then there tend to be the little decisions. They're not, a huge impact. There's something that is easily, can be reversed, those type of things. And I love to have my team make those decisions. I don't want them having to come in. I want them taking ownership. Saves me time, which is something I love. And it also is a great way for them to get practice if they want to move up in their career, if they want to do various things. And then there are the bigger decisions, which, obviously they're probably more critical, more impact on sales, revenue, performance, those type of things. Or resources. This is going to involve 4 different departments in a major way. I can't make this decision without interacting with them, those type of things. So again, everybody's going to be a little different. Hey, it's Lisa from Cedar Rapids. Everybody's going to be a little different. That's mine. Yours may be a little different. You may have different categories, but really try and think that through. How do you have those decisions? And then try to communicate your process, which is a great topic for a staff meeting. Talk about what those, what the 3 or 4 or 5 categories you have are, how you define them, how you differentiate between them, and those type of things. So that first thing really is have a process. Those people have a process, but they've never really intentionally thought it through, right? We make decisions, managers particularly make decisions constantly, right? So we have a process that we go through in our head, but we never really sit down and kind of intentionally do it. So that's really phase 1 of that, is to make sure you do that. Phase 2 is a reminder back from your high school math days, probably, of show your work, right? And that's really what you want to do, is show your work. Now, you'll notice before I said communicate your process. I didn't say teach your process. And that's really very intentional language on my part, because teaching your process is difficult because there's so many different variables in it, as I mentioned at the top. When you're doing something, right, you have certain questions you ask in your head and certain variables that you place one over the other, those type of things. So I say communicate your process, because you're not really saying, okay, here's how I do it. I ask question 1, 2, 3, 4. Question 1 is the most important. Question 4 is the least. It's rarely that cut and dry. You just don't do it. We don't make decisions like that. So what I like to do is talk through my decision-making process, show them how I am making my decisions. For example, when I'm making decisions or someone comes to me with a problem, one of the first things I do is I ask, okay, what's the problem you're trying to solve? I want that very concise. I want that narrow. If someone goes, well, I'm trying to do this and this and this, and I go, well, okay, that's too much. What's the key thing, right? And when I'm doing that and I'm telling the people on my team, I'm going, you know what? What I really want you to do is focus on solving the main problem. If you're trying to do too much, it gets too complicated, too convoluted, you're probably going to fail. Really focus and narrow down on that one question. What's the problem I'm trying to solve? And then I will say, okay, who does it impact on this team? Customers, other people in the company. What is that impact? Is it an easily reversible decision? What are some unintended consequences that I might be able to think of? And as I'm asking all of these questions, really, I'm explaining why I'm asking them, right? So what you are probably gathering happens is the team is not only seeing me go through the process, but as I'm explaining the why and how it's all working together, they're kind of internally developing my process. They're learning what I'm thinking and why, and they're kind of internalizing it. So that when I do it the next time and I do the same thing, hey, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Okay, who does it impact? And we go through that whole thing. They start to see that as a pattern. And what's going to eventually end up happening is when they come to me, they're going to say, hey, I need a decision on X. And here's the problem I'm trying to solve. Here's who it impacts. Here's, some pun intended. They start to internalize what you're going to ask. And once you've done that, you've kind of you've taken them to that next level, right? They're no longer coming to you and saying, I need a decision. They're having thought it through ahead of time to do it. So talk through that and do it in real time. I know it sounds weird and it feels funny, but do it in real time because, again, we learn while doing. Most of us as adults, we learn by doing. So when they're seeing you do it and then they see you come to a conclusion, that's making a huge impact on the decisions they have to make. Okay. Just realized that I've got my little caption at the bottom, and we've already started. So I'm going to change that real quick. So that's talking through your work. Really, it's kind of important. In what you're going to find and what they're going to see is it's not a clear-cut rule or process, right? It's not cut and dry. Most people think managers, either because of their role or because of their experience, have this ability to innately distill an issue down and come up with this magic answer. And that's just not true, right? Any person who's become a manager for the first time, when people start asking you, you kind of have that little voice in your head going, why are they asking me this? Why do they think I know more than they do? And it's really because of that role. They tend to think that. So you're showing them that this is a process you go through, and you're going to get to things where you're going to say, who does it impact and what are the unintended consequences? And you're going to go, there's a conflict between those two. And now I've got to rethink that and really kind of do it. And normally this wouldn't be there. They see that and they realize, hey, he's or she is just struggling just as much as I would making this decision. Yeah, they have more experience. Yeah, they have more responsibility. But the process that they're using in their brain to go through this is the same one I would go through. So the questions you're asking help make the decision, and why they matter is really, really critical for them. Right? So again, the first one is to have your process. Again, probably have a couple different ones, and they're not going to be set in stone. They're going to go in different ways. And as you're dealing with this with employees, show them how you're thinking through the process. Let them see very actively what's going on and what's happening. So I'm going to stop here to see if there are any questions at this point. I'd love to hear if there are any. Just put them in the chat. And while I'm waiting to see if any questions come in, I want to talk a little bit, just kind of promote my Great Manager community. So you see the QR code in there. So I have a community, a Great Manager community, where it's a bunch of managers who come together to try and help each other, to help us become the best we can be. Because most of us, maybe we didn't get training on it. We didn't know what being a great manager is. Or our company is kind of all over the place with it. You're like, I don't know what being a great manager is. So this community is designed to help each other. So you can go in there and you can see what I'm teaching in my various ways. You can hear from other people. You can ask questions. You can do all these things. That's what we're looking for in this community. So I'd love for you to kind of do that and join the community. You can go to my webpage and there's a link to join the community. And what's really great is there's two levels, actually. So there's a free level where you will get a weekly blog post and a weekly newsletter that I send out that, based on the open rates and the comments I get, people like it. It gives them some valuable information. And that's really my goal, to make sure people have valuable, useful, actionable information. And then the newsletter, which is where I share some things that I've come across. Articles, videos, different things. I've got a little business humor thing I put in there, right? And it's really just something that you can kind of read a summary, go, I'm more interested in that. Click on a link, go to something deeper, or, no, that doesn't impact me. Boom, boom, boom. Again, people have said, that they find this very helpful. The format of being able to see a bunch of different things and dig deeper into one, if you like it, they tend to like it. So I would love if you would join the Great Manager community. The paid membership, in addition to those two things, you would also get a post on Friday that I call In the News, where I kind of take a more complex look at something that's relevant in the news. For example, today's that went out this morning was about why hasn't engagement gone up? Engagement stayed flat. Employee engagement has been flat for 20 plus years. And why is it that it's not really going up, even though companies are spending billions of dollars on this particular problem? And so I kind of address that a little bit. And I do that in various ways. Also, if you're a paid member, there's a bunch of free resources that I have available. There's a Great Manager quiz that kind of lets you know where you stand and where you can improve. And I'm always adding to those resources all the time. So membership is $5 a month or $50 a year. It's very reasonable. And we'd love to have you part of the community. So please go and join that if you get a chance. But let's move to another part of the decision-making process, which is really talking them through that process. Okay. So now once you've defined your process for them and they've seen you do it because you've been showing your work, now is the time to start to challenge them a little more on what to do. So when they come to you with that question, right, they want a decision made, don't make it, but start to walk them through the process. So you ask them the questions. What's the problem you're trying to solve? And make them answer. And then you start to answer ask all these questions. Then when you get to the end of it, just like you have been doing, but now at the end you go, so what do you think you should do? And be quiet. Okay. One of the things when you first do it, they'll kind of be, I was just waiting for you to make it. And you're like, no, I want you to make this decision. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you would do. Based on all this information that you told me that we worked through together, what would you do? And let them answer. Now, if it's I don't want to say not a consequential, but if it's something that's not going to have huge ramifications, kill your budget or do whatever, right? Let them know. Just say, okay, tell me what you do. They tell you to say, go do that. Don't tell them whether you agree or not. Don't tell them, yeah, that's the decision I would have made. Just say, okay, go do it. Right? You're not hanging them out to dry. You're not trying to be mean to them. You're not trying to do any of that. What you're really doing is saying, go make the decision. Then you can follow up afterwards and say, how did it work? How did it feel? Was it uncomfortable? Was it uneasy? Did you second guess yourself a lot? What is it? Kind of work through those issues. But then say, how did it work out? Right? If they say, oh, it worked out great, say, excellent. Right? I knew you could make that decision. If they say, well, this kind of came up, but then you can say, oh, was that something you could have thought ahead of time? How would you have done that process a little differently? And really start to kind of have that coaching, mentoring mindset to this. Right? What you want to get to the point where they're comfortable making decisions without even coming to you first, because they know what you're going to do is say, okay, is that what you decided? Go do that. Right? Now, if it's, like I said, something that's huge, they're going to upset a major customer or they're going to do this, you may want to say something like, I understand what you're thinking, but have you thought about this? Or I'm wondering if that's going to impact this customer too much, and they're pretty major to us. Those type of things. You can try and guide them, and if they're really going to go down a path that is damaging, stop them, right? But for the most part, what you're going to find is they're going to make a decision. You're going to go, okay, and it may differ than the decision you'd make. Here's where manager ego has to get put aside. Okay, their decision may be better than yours. Right? They may have some knowledge or experience or intuition or whatever that makes their decision a little better. We don't know until afterwards, right? But trust them. Let them go and make that decision. That's where you want them to be, right? And then do that follow up. Hey, how'd it go? What went well? What didn't go well? What would you do differently next time? And once you do that, they start to, that muscle, that decision making muscle, and those skills really come into play and they become very powerful. And what you'll find is as you're doing this, they're going in there and they're making decisions and they're doing all this great stuff and you don't even realize it. And they're making decisions without coming to you ahead of time. And you're seeing that everything's flowing faster, everything's flowing smoother. And to be honest, it actually gets a little uncomfortable because you're like, man, stuff's getting done and I don't know what's really happening. And you may need to ask, hey, what things have you done, and kind of do that. But get them into that mode of making decisions. One, it'll make your job easier. Two, you're helping develop them. And if they want to move on to those promotions and those hires role, they're getting a skill and an experience that helps them. And three, the company's going to be faster. It's going to be more efficient. We all have too much to do. If I take 10 decisions off my plate, it's done by 5 other people, makes my life much easier, makes the company more efficient. So do that. Now, before we move on, there are a couple, what I call miscellaneous issues that to be aware of. When we're making decisions, and we all do this, there are going to be times where you're going to go with your instinct. You're going to go with your gut. And it's okay. That's fine to do that, provided that's the exception, not the rule. The whole reason of a process is to help you have an efficient way of doing this. But there's times where you're like, I know this feels like the right decision based on the only information, but my gut tells me X. And that is okay. As long as they're the exception, as long as you're clear on it, right? I know all the stuff you told me. I'm just thinking, I want to go with my gut and do this. It gives you a little freedom, and it gives them a little freedom as well, which is important. So, really use your gut when you need to. As managers, we all have that ability, particularly as you get more experience and more comfort with it, to say, I know this is the right decision, but I really think we're going to do that. Why? And just be honest. Say, I realize it's probably not the normal way, but I'm just going with my gut. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, admit, I trusted my gut. I should have gone with the process. Oh, well. Right? Another miscellaneous thing is when they're making that decision, afterwards, ask them to do an informal after-action review. Right? What went well? What didn't go well? What would you have done differently? What questions would you have asked? And again, the point is not to make them second guess themselves. It's to really say, okay, now that you know all these things, what will you do differently next time? And they're going to say, you know what? I didn't think of how that would impact marketing. Oh, yeah. So maybe that's a question we need to ask next time. What is the impact on marketing? All those various things. I thought this was going to help all customers, but I realized afterwards that, it helps our big customers, but not our little ones. That's something you need to think about next time. Now, do this regardless of whether the decision worked out well or poorly. If you've ever heard me talk about the concept of resulting, the process is what matters, not the result. Resulting says, I did this and it worked out well, so it was a good process. No, not really. If you do everything right, you could still get a bad result. If you did everything wrong in the decision-making process, you could still get a good result, right? We want to make sure we're doing this after-action review every time, good or bad, and talking specifically about the process, not the result, okay? The perfect example of this is, if someone decides to drive home and do 80 miles an hour the entire drive, not stop for stoplights or stop signs, and they get home in record time, well, that's a great result. But they did everything wrong going up to it. You don't want to get into that area. So the third thing is feedback. Feedback. Always give them feedback on the decision-making process. Hey, here's what you did well. Here's what I would have done differently. Here's something you need to pay attention to. Again, constantly giving them that. We all should be doing that, right? Because decisions are, unfortunately, they're rather rarely A plus B equals C. Okay, they tend to have different factors, and it gets very, very complicated. So giving that feedback and saying, "Hey, I know that decision didn't work out, but your process was right. You couldn't have anticipated X." Okay, or I noticed that you didn't take this into account. Why did that happen? Maybe next time you should do that a little differently. All those things. Make sure you're giving that feedback. That is what's critical to all of this. So that's pretty much my presentation. Hopefully that's helpful to everyone. As I've mentioned, doing this is obviously a benefit to you as a manager, right? The fewer decisions you have to make, the better off you are. And as you start to let them do this, the one thing that you'll find out is very few people will start calling you a micromanager. Micromanagers tend to say, I have to make all decisions. Bring it all to me. Bring it all to me. Bring it all to me. The rest of us who aren't micromanagers tend to say, I trust you. Go do this. I'm going to give you the autonomy to do this. I'm going to teach you. I'm not leaving you out on an island somewhere. I'm teaching you, but I want you to do this on your own. Right? So it's a huge benefit to you because it saves you time. Again, the company benefits because you're building a bench of people able to make decisions, and you're doing it in an organized and thoughtful way. And you're saying, you know what? They're going to come across as, hey, I made this decision, and managers and others will notice that. They're going to get promoted, right? And they're going to start to see all these great things. So you're going to want to make sure you do this. So I'm going to wrap up with a few things, but if you have any questions or comments, please throw them in the questions and comments area so I can answer them. Again, this will be on my YouTube page. My guess is probably by Monday, no later than Monday, maybe even over the weekend sometime. So if you want to go back and look at this, it'll be on there. If you want to share this with others, I would love and appreciate that. The more the people that see this and learn about our community and the various ways to do it, better off they are. And I hope you appreciate that other than talking about my community, this wasn't a huge sales pitch. This is really a matter of me trying to get information out to help you. So with that, I am going to say good afternoon. Have a great weekend. Rest, refresh, recharge. That's what it takes to make a difference. And again, if you throw any comments or any questions in there, I'll be checking the LinkedIn over the course of the afternoon. I'll answer them as best I can. But I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And have a great afternoon.